The room was unusually quiet for a live televised political special, the kind of quiet that only comes when something big is about to happen, something unexpected. Jasmine Crockett had sat through half the segment listening to Donald Trump boast about his perfect marriage and how Melania had always stood by him, unbothered by what he called fake news scandals. He was in his usual rhythm, throwing blame in every direction but his own. Melania sat next to him, hands folded neatly in her lap, eyes forward, lips pressed into a vague smile that said nothing and everything. When it was Crockett's turn to speak, she didn't raise her voice or posture dramatically. Instead, she simply leaned forward and spoke with the steadiness of someone holding a loaded file of secrets. "You talk a lot about loyalty, Mr. Trump," she began, keeping her eyes locked on him. "But I wonder how many people in America know just how much you had to buy it, especially from the person sitting next to you." The studio air tightened. The audience fell into an unnatural stillness, as if the molecules in the room had stopped moving. Even the host looked confused, unsure of where she was going. Trump narrowed his eyes. Melania didn't flinch. Crockett continued. "Most Americans aren't aware that in 2017, shortly after you took office, there was a private renegotiation of a legal agreement between you and your wife, an agreement that dates back to 2005, when your prenup first included a strict non-disclosure clause." Trump tried to cut her off. "That's nonsense. You're making this up like everything else you people do." But Crockett didn't stop. She held up a document, not flashing it dramatically, just raising it enough to show the room she had receipts. "This," she said, "is a legal memo, outlining revisions to a pre-existing non-disclosure contract, confirmed by a former Trump Organization legal counsel who left under NDA restrictions. According to this, in exchange for Melania's agreement to remain silent during the Stormy Daniels scandal and other extracurricular issues, you authorized the transfer of beneficial ownership of an offshore trust to her." Trump's face turned red. "You don't know what the hell you're talking about. This is all lies. Disgusting lies." But Crockett was just getting started. She glanced at Melania, then back at Trump. The trust in question registered in the British Virgin Islands, received deposits from a shell company that had previously handled payouts for licensing deals tied to Trump hotels in Turkey and the Philippines. That's not speculation. That's in the financial disclosures your own company filed before the 2020 campaign. The timing of those transactions within days of the Stormy Daniels hush money payments makes it hard to see this as coincidence. Trump raised his hand to interrupt, his voice rising. "This is a setup. You people brought her on to smear me and my family. My wife doesn't need anything from me." But Crockett stayed calm. "If that's the case, then why did she renegotiate the prenup again in 2023, just months after your third indictment? Another trust, another shift in ownership, all documented through offshore banking proxies. You don't need to answer now, because Congress is going to get the answers for the American people." Trump was now visibly agitated. His voice cracked as he yelled toward the producers, demanding to know why she was even allowed to be there. He accused CNN of being in on it, waving his hands like a man unraveling in real time. Meanwhile, Melania still didn't move, not a blink, not a word. Crockett added, "Loyalty built on silence and cash is not the same thing as integrity. And when the public learns the cost of that silence, they'll understand just how much of your empire was based on carefully bought discretion." Trump was shouting by then, his words lost in the chaos as the host attempted to steer things back. But it was too late. The moment had landed. The bombshell wasn't just about money or offshore accounts, it was about the transactional truth behind what Donald Trump had long claimed was untouchable: his marriage, his image, and the illusion of personal loyalty. Crockett didn't need to raise her voice. She just laid the truth out flat, piece by piece, like a surgeon revealing a diagnosis. And for once, Trump couldn't control the room. The moment Donald Trump realized Jasmine Crockett wasn't playing by the usual rules, something in his expression shifted. He was used to political opponents throwing barbs, reporters asking uncomfortable questions, even former allies turning on him for airtime. But this was different. He had walked into the CNN special with his chin high, smug in the belief that no one on stage could truly rattle him. Crockett didn't just rattle him, she detonated something live, in real time, that stripped away his rehearsed confidence and left only raw, exposed nerves. It had started subtly. Crockett dropped her bombshell with precision, calmly citing offshore trusts, financial disclosures, and renegotiated marital contracts. But as the details stacked up and began pointing not only to hidden transactions, but to a deeply transactional marriage, Trump's cool began to dissolve. The air in the studio seemed to change temperature as he shifted in his chair, then stood up entirely. "You're disgusting. This is disgusting," he snapped, pointing a trembling finger at Crockett. "You're a fraud. You're making this up, right here on national television. Attacking my wife? Attacking me? What kind of garbage is this?" Crockett didn't flinch. She kept her voice even. If it's all fabricated, then I'm sure you'll have no issue with these documents being submitted for public review. Transparency shouldn't scare you, Mr. Trump. That was the moment he lost it. Trump stepped forward, ignoring the host's attempts to regain control. You think you're tough because you throw a few papers in the air and pretend you know something? You know nothing. You've always been a loudmouth puppet for the radical left. That's all you are. Asterisk. The host tried to step in, voice raised. Mr. Trump, please, this is a moderated discussion. Asterisk. But Trump wasn't listening anymore. They brought you here to attack me. You're working with them. This whole setup, this whole show, it's a damn ambush. Asterisk. Producers off stage were signaling frantically, unsure whether to cut the feed or let it ride. In the control room, someone muttered, "He's unraveling. Keep it going." Asterisk. Trump's voice cracked again. "This woman, this liar comes up here talking about my wife like she knows her. You don't know her. You don't deserve to say her name." Asterisk. Crockett didn't rise to the bait. "Then let Melania speak. Let her clarify the trust, the assets, the filings. Or maybe she can explain why she signed over fiduciary rights to an account that funneled payments from Trump International Holdings." After the Daniels story hit the news, Asterisk. The fury in Trump's face was no longer just political, it was personal. But what made the moment more devastating was how obvious it became that Crockett wasn't flustered at all. She had come prepared, and Trump, he had come assuming he'd intimidate his way through. Asterisk. He stormed toward the edge of the stage, barking at the producers, "Get this clown show off the air. I'm not doing this. This is over. It's fake. It's all fake." But even as he raged, the cameras didn't cut. They kept rolling, capturing every second of his meltdown. Asterisk. The host turned to the audience, clearly shaken. "We apologize to our viewers. We'll try to return to a moderated format shortly." Asterisk. But Trump wasn't done. He turned back, his face flushed. "You think you can take me down with this crap? My people don't care about this. My wife's not part of this. You leave her out of it." Asterisk. Crockett simply said, "Then why does the financial trail lead right through her name? Why were your legal teams so focused on shielding those trusts from public view? I'm not attacking your wife. I'm attacking the corruption that follows your name like a shadow." Asterisk. Trump didn't respond. For a moment, he simply stood there, breathing heavily, eyes darting between Crockett, the host, and the audience. He realized too late that storming out would only confirm what everyone was already watching unfold, that Crockett had found a pressure point he couldn't defend. Asterisk. Eventually, with no better option, he threw up his hands and left the stage. Melania followed, silent as ever. Asterisk. It wasn't the content of Crockett's revelations alone that hit hardest, it was Trump's explosive reaction that made the moment unforgettable. In that studio, live on television, the image of Donald Trump as the composed, unshakable dealmaker crumbled. He didn't just get angry, he lost control. And in politics, losing control is the one thing you can't afford not, when the cameras never blink. As the stage calmed from Donald Trump's outburst, the cameras remained fixed. The audience unsure if they were still watching politics or something far more raw, far more revealing. Jasmine Crockett hadn't raised her voice. She didn't need to. The weight of her words and the calm with which she delivered them did more damage than any shouted accusation. After cracking open the shell of Trump's tightly managed image, she shifted her focus to something far more intricate and, possibly more damning. Melania and Trump's charity. Asterisk. Crockett adjusted the mic slightly and resumed. "While we're on the topic of financial entanglements and hidden interests, there's another thread that's been conveniently overlooked." She glanced briefly toward Melania's now empty seat before turning back to the cameras. The charity Melania launched in 2018. The Be Best initiative. We all remember that. Asterisk. Some chuckles rippled through the audience. Crockett didn't react. What most people don't realize is that the foundation tied to Be Best never filed the complete Form 990, the IRS form required for tax-exempt organizations. In fact, several years went by without any full disclosure. But what's more interesting is who was sitting on the board. Asterisk. She paused just long enough to let the weight of her next words land. A trustee named Andrej Kovac, a Slovenian financier connected to an offshore wealth management firm based in Cyprus, the same firm that manages the very trust Melania was given access to in the renegotiated agreement I mentioned earlier. Asterisk. The audience went silent. The host blinked, stunned. Crockett continued. Kovac wasn't just a coincidence. The firm he represents had been doing business with Trump Organization's subsidiaries since at least 2014, long before the presidency. But in 2018, after the public backlash over the Stormy Daniels payout, a quiet transfer occurred, one that gave Melania control over a particular family trust connected to that same firm. Asterisk. In the back of the room, a few reporters began typing furiously. Crockett's tone remained composed. That trust received deposits from 3 sources. 1. A licensing deal with Trump International Manila. 2. A real estate holding company in the UAE. And 3. A shell corporation tied to payments made to settle personal legal matters. She let that linger. "It's one thing for a first lady to run a charitable organization," she said, "but it's another when that organization overlaps with financial vehicles. tied to international deals that were never properly discussed. When those vehicles are under the partial control of foreign nationals, asterisk, by this point, the host was visibly rattled, trying to keep the conversation on track. Congresswoman Crockett, are you saying there's a direct financial link between Melania Trump's charity and offshore assets belonging to Donald Trump? Asterisk, I'm not saying it, she replied. I'm showing it. The money moved. The names are documented. The board appointments match. The filings or lack thereof speak volumes. Asterisk. Crockett then pulled out another document and handed it to the host. This is a redacted bank compliance report, flagged internally by Deutsche Bank's anti-money laundering division. It notes a politically exposed person with access to a trust connected to Melania Trump. The report was never acted upon, but it exists. Asterisk. The host scanned it briefly, visibly stunned. And this was during the presidency? Asterisk. 2019, Crockett answered, and it matches the timeline of her charity's peak media presence and, also, curiously, the timeline of certain delayed investigations into Trump's overseas holdings. Asterisk. Backstage, Trump was reportedly pacing, shouting at aides, and demanding the feed be cut, but it was too late. Crockett had already dropped the details, clean-sourced, and dangerously believable. Asterisk. This isn't about a First Lady's public image, Crockett added. It's about the use of charitable platforms to quietly move and protect assets at the height of federal investigations. If the IRS had done its job, this might have come out years ago. But now the American public has a chance to see it. Asterisk. She folded her notes and sat back. No dramatics, just data, just facts. Asterisk. And with that, a new layer of scrutiny landed not just on Donald Trump and his organization, but on the very structure that had insulated him for so long. Melania, long considered off-limits, now found herself at the center of a financial web that no longer looked like a coincidence. It looked like a strategy. The fallout began before the broadcast even ended. Social media lit up within minutes of Jasmine Crockett's revelations. Hashtags exploded. Hashtag Trump meltdown. Hashtag Melania trust files. Hashtag Crockett bombshell. Political analysts scrambled to verify claims. Offshore finance experts were called into newsrooms mid-segment, and Congress began receiving calls demanding an inquiry. But what shocked even veteran observers wasn't just what Crockett said it was how fast her information began lining up with public records and previously ignored red flags. What had been dismissed for years as speculation or conspiracy was now being mapped out in real time. And the pieces were suddenly clicking into place. Asterisk. Donald Trump's outburst had backfired. Instead of silencing the conversation, it had given it gasoline. He had stormed off stage, red-faced and shouting, but the cameras had kept rolling, capturing not just a man angered, but a man cornered. The kind of rage that doesn't come from lies but from being exposed. Asterisk. Within 24 hours, investigative reporters began digging into Melania's nonprofit filings, and what they found echoed Crockett's words. The Be Best initiative, which had gained attention during Trump's presidency, had virtually no transparent financial reporting. Journalists uncovered that the IRS had no complete filings from the organization for multiple years. Donations were unaccounted for. Public events funded by the foundation were vague in purpose and rarely documented in detail. Asterisk. More damning still was the link to Andrej Kovac. The Slovenian financial advisor Crockett had mentioned on-air news outlets traced his business activities through a Cyprus-based wealth firm that had known connections to multiple offshore accounts tied to Trump Organization shell companies. In a particularly revealing document leaked to a financial news site, a transfer of nearly $3 million was made into a discretionary trust overseen by Kovac exactly 2 weeks after Stormy Daniels' settlement became public knowledge in 2018. Asterisk. This information spread like wildfire. Congressional Democrats began circulating a letter demanding a formal investigation into possible tax fraud and financial misconduct involving Melania Trump's charity. Republicans scrambled to downplay it, calling it political theater, but behind closed doors, panic began to build. The financial trail wasn't theoretical anymore. It was visible, tangible, and Crockett had handed the nation a map. Asterisk. Trump, meanwhile, released a string of all-caps Truth Social posts calling Crockett a disgrace to the nation, a liar bought by the radical left, and even accused her of colluding with foreign governments to fabricate stories. The irony wasn't lost on many. Trump accusing someone else of colluding with foreign entities while offshore accounts in Melania's name were now under the spotlight. Asterisk. In interviews the next day, Crockett was calm, measured, and deliberate. She didn't backpedal, she doubled down. The public deserves to know whether a sitting president used his wife's charity and offshore trusts to shield his finances during multiple criminal investigations, she said on MSNBC. Was clean? They wouldn't have worked so hard to hide it. Asterisk. And the hits kept coming. Financial institutions began cooperating with reporters. A Swiss bank anonymously confirmed that a high-profile American political spouse had attempted to restructure a family trust in early 2023, though they wouldn't name names. The timing aligned perfectly with the latest changes Crockett had revealed during the CNN broadcast. Former Trump staffers began speaking quietly. One described an atmosphere of panic in Trump Tower whenever Melania's financial agreements came up. Everyone treated it like radioactive material, he said. There were 3 people allowed to see those documents. One of them was Cohen, the other 2, gone. It wasn't long before independent investigators began filing Freedom of Information Act requests for every charitable and trust-related filing connected to Melania from 2016 onward. Legal experts on both sides admitted that even if Crockett's revelations didn't lead directly to criminal charges, the reputational damage alone could be devastating, not just to Trump, but to anyone tied to the campaign. And through it all, one thing became clear. Jasmine Crockett had cracked the surface of a carefully constructed facade. Trump had spent years building an empire of secrecy, with layers of distraction shielding the real structure beneath. Crockett didn't just find a weak point, she smashed a hole wide enough for the nation to look through. What she revealed wasn't just corruption, it was calculation. And the more people saw, the harder it became for anyone to look away. In the days that followed Jasmine Crockett's live television confrontation with Donald Trump, a shift occurred not just in headlines, but in public perception. What began as a political clash quickly escalated into something far more significant. A moment of reckoning. Crockett hadn't shouted. She hadn't postured. She'd simply walked into a room that had long been sealed shut and turned on the lights. And once the truth began spilling out about trusts, contracts, offshore accounts, and a First Lady's questionable foundation, there was no putting it back in the dark. Donald Trump, who had spent his career mastering the art of controlling the narrative, was caught in a rare position, reacting. His fury, broadcast live, gave weight to Crockett's calm. His walk-off, meant to show protest, instead suggested fear, and his frenzied online outbursts painted a portrait of a man who wasn't just angry but cornered. For years, he'd deflected accountability by turning every question into a performance, but this time, there was no performance strong enough to hide the panic behind his eyes. What Crockett unearthed wasn't just about financial mismanagement or marital secrecy, it was about a pattern of concealment that stretched across continents and institutions. The blurred lines between Trump's private wealth, public office, and Melania's limited public role now looked far less accidental and far more orchestrated. And in doing so, Crockett did what few had successfully done in Trump's political orbit. She made it personal, without ever being petty. She didn't attack Melania's character, she questioned the mechanisms used to protect Trump from consequences. Even when those mechanisms were wrapped in a designer coat and standing silently beside him, the impact rippled beyond Trump's circle. Legal experts began drafting briefs. Congressional oversight committees reopened dormant files. Financial journalists started connecting names that had sat untouched in offshore filings for years. Even those who had long defended Trump found themselves asking hard questions not just about what was hidden, but why it had stayed hidden for so long. And through it all, Crockett remained composed. Her credibility grew. Her voice, once viewed by some as just another Democratic firebrand, took on new authority. She didn't need to over-explain. She simply let the facts and Trump's reaction to them speak for themselves. It became clear that this wasn't just another news cycle scandal, it was a turning point. The moment where bluster gave way to accountability, where silence could no longer mask complicity, and where even the most powerful figure in American politics realized that the walls around him were thinner than he thought. Crockett had opened the door and the world was